Securitize that.
Yeah. All right. So Securitize. You've been chomping at the bit on CRE. It's the acronym that Sam used, commercial real estate. So obviously the heart of this crisis is hitting the leisure sector. CMBS has been exposed there. So CMBS, the commercial real estate market, had a few challenges pre-COVID. We had the retail apocalypse that people have been talking about, the malls, the strip malls around the country, the online shopping impacting that. Then we've had the COVID.
It was a slow train wreck.
Yeah, that's a slow, and it still exists, and those were the problematic
It's not slow
areas.
anymore.
No, it's being accelerated, but I'm saying it's been for a long time. It's been talked about since really 2014 or so. Then we have now the leisure sector that's getting hit. Those would be the hotels specifically.
I'm not even surprised about lodging.
Yeah, no, I mean, and look, you're seeing that come back a fair amount until you get business travel back. That's going to be a bombed out area.
I'll give you my reason in just a minute why I'm not surprised. Anyways.
Okay, and then lastly, you also have multifamily housing in there. Or not lastly, one of the other things you have is multifamily housing due to forbearance, and then you also have the federal government in there with the Freddie K's.
There's a multifamily story.
And then we also have office space, which people are extremely, extremely bearish on. So when we talk about commercial real estate, there's a lot of different arms that are problematic. There's still some very shining spots in there too. But let's jump into that. So first of all, what do you think is the most problematic? Where do you think there's some decent kind of opportunities that people are overlooking too?
I don't as bad as, because TREP just came out. TREP follows the
commercial real estate market.
Commercial real estate market. They do great commercial mortgage-backed securities data.
Yep.
So
we use those for ripping apart cash flows and stuff. We're a subscriber.
Yes.
So, yes. Yeah.
So I guess 24.3% was June delinquency on lodging. And that was higher than retail, which was, I think, 18 or 19%.
Yeah, but amazingly, multifamily, depending on the tiering of the collateral, if you actually look at it, what you've seen there is the tier 1 collateral actually has outperformed last year in rent recoveries.
Yep.
But there's also payments being there's a lot of issues there.
There's a multifamily story that's unfolding that nobody's paying attention to, I think. But first, lodging.
Okay.
If you look at CMBS lodging, 50% of the CMBS lodging universe is full service. And
what do you mean by full service?
I mean nice hotels.
Okay.
Where you can get room service.
Right.
And they've been actually when Jeffrey and I were speaking yesterday, he brought up that in every town in America now there's a nice hotel. And I said that's because private equity required it. They had too much money. So if there's one thing that we've seen in the past dozen years, it is an overbuilding of luxury hotels, full service hotels, an overbuilding of luxury apartment units in central business districts, which we didn't believe to be the case a year ago. And I think that these two factors are not well enough appreciated. If you read companies' comments right now, whether any company that used to have business travel, I mean, these budgets have been decimated, and it's going to take a long time, I think, because of this Zoom revolution, before treasurers find the wiggle room inside the budget to really release business spending again. So the implications for lodging liquidations, I think, are tremendous.
Yeah, we've seen some equity sponsors, private equity sponsors. We call them equity sponsors because they typically are the borrower in the deal. But we've seen some step away recently, like big names step away, and they were exactly what you're talking about. It was the lodging that was targeted for short term. They're kind of short term rentals for folks who may be like a consultant spending 2 or 3 weeks there. And so you saw them walk away. I think it's from like 11 properties in this one deal.
It's Jingle Mail. Remember Jingle Mail?
Yeah, the keys, right?
It's Jingle Mail, but it's the GP who's mailing the mails.
But now we don't have the keys. We have key cards in the room. So I don't know what we got to get something more clever.
Interesting, yeah. But I don't think people appreciate the supply side of the lodging story. I think it is an underappreciated, and the advent of single asset, single borrower paper. I mean, you had all these lobbyists, all these trade organizations, 20 of them, I think, send Powell and Mnuchin an open letter saying, we're going to go bankrupt. And single asset, single borrower. I remember
Tom Barracks was authoring that very early on, too, right?
But this asset class didn't exist. And last year it was 47% of CMBS issuance. And single asset, single borrower is one massive property. That's the whole CMBS.
Yep. Right.
And
that's why it's called single asset. The
that's
single
why it's called
borrower
single
means
asset
you have
and
one
single
person
borrower.
that owns it, right?
But pensions,
Yeah.
endowments,
Right.
life insurance companies, inappropriate investors have piled into this asset class, kind of like they've piled into private debt. It's like the darling of the pension management, and you've got to be in this new hot sector, and it's just wicked risky.
Right. So you called it wicked risky. Let's unpackage that, because if you think about what's happened too, the Fed hasn't supported that area. So we've been.
Well, that's why we're talking about it, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so, would you say that these are markets that actually really reflect the true risk out there, the things that aren't supported by the Fed, right? And that's what we've been arguing not arguing, but that's been our investment thesis throughout this pandemic, is that, look, I don't want to go and buy corporate bonds at 2%, and I don't want to follow the Powell train.
Right.
What I want to do is go back to fundamental research and say, look, here's intrinsic value, here's where this stuff trades, and we see assets like these actually are trading below fair value, even if you bring on a massive crisis, right?
Because you've got a bid-ask spread that's like, I don't even know what to make of that. And you can't bring them together. I mean, it's like junk bonds in the 90s or something, where there's actual spread to be had because price discovery occurs when the trade occurs.
That's right.
Which is that's old-fashioned investing 101, but it's one of the few areas where I think...
we all saw that in March. I'll say that the trading was rough. I mean, we aged a lot over those few weeks. That was definitely a test over.
Pre-Powell, when you had the S&P limit down every day, I mean, as bad as it looked on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, in the bond pits, it was bloody.
Yeah, I was doing some analysis for someone too, and the short-term corporate ETF that trades 1 to 3 year bonds, highly liquid, it's top tier credit quality, peak to trough drawdown in 10 days. Those are 10 calendar days. Was 13%, and that is short duration, high quality investment grade corporates. So there was a problem. But why I bring this up is that you're talking about that chasm and that price discovery. Well, I would argue that we never got it in corporate bonds again.
No.
Everything traded in the same manner. And then all of a sudden, with Superman Powell, as we've been calling him lately, so it's kind of the play on Super Mario. We had Draghi, so we got Super Powell.
I call him J-Po.
J-Po? P-O-W? Like a Pow or a P? Yeah. We have a lot of names for him. But so anyway, what we found is that all of a sudden now, these other markets that don't have the support continue to trade in that manner, that there is risk. Right? And so what's an investor to do when looking in these? How do you access commercial real estate? I mean, again, you have to be an active manager. The ETF the ETF looks nothing like what the true exposure is out there, because it's like super high quality.
But it's still fascinating that it's within a hair of its 52-week high.
Right. No, it is. I agree, but also some of that stuff's TALFEL. There's been these support programs.
There is a slice of it that's got support.
And that's why I distinguish between, if you go back, what Powell allowed into TALF is conduit deals in the CMBS market, not single asset, single borrowers.
Right.
Because there was this perception that he'd be bailing out private equity. Right. But if you just do it to the whole beta trade in the space, it's okay. So we've seen a huge gap in pricing there too.
$3 billion. We haven't seen the public data yet, but private equity spent $3 billion lobbying Congress, lobbying Steve Mnuchin in the first quarter alone. So they've really been trying.
And I would say that was probably over the last couple of weeks of that quarter too, probably.
Right, exactly. So God knows what Q2 looks like.
Right.
But they've been really trying to get some coverage here because these deals are so bad. I mean, they're just so, and they're like, but we put more equity in than we put in last cycle. And you're like, it's still. So on that note too, before, we got to dig in the other sectors of commercial real estate, but on that note too, what about the moral hazard here? I mean, isn't it almost like Powell's picking winners and losers? This is pure credit allocation. Yeah. This is it's exactly what you described. He's God. Yeah. He's God in the world of credit right now. Yeah. He really is.
Well, Masters of the Universe, we'd been calling him Masters of the Universe. They used to be the hedge funds. Then we went to central bankers. Maybe he's the central banker hedge fund corporate god now, right?
Ugh. I don't run the fan club anymore.
Okay, well, that's why I said we've gotten past that. So, okay, let's move on to the next leg. So you said you started with leisure, right? And lodging. I'm calling it not leisure, but lodging.
So I think we'll touch on retail for a second. 9,800 stores closed last year, and that was the worst year in history. The estimate for 2020 is 25,000 stores.
Wow.
The estimate for the next 4 years is 100,000 stores. So I think that commercial real estate developers are going to be raising off the planet entire malls that are in choice locations in the next decade, because people don't appreciate the magnitude, the number of. I mean, Simon Properties stepping away from its massive $3.6 billion merger because they were high-end malls that they were buying from Taubman Centers. I mean, that was a moment.
Yeah. And they're one of the largest owner-operators out there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But Microsoft, which paid $1,000 a foot, that was in only Class A malls, has announced it's closing all of its stores. Because we used to just talk about malls as Class B and Class C as being
at risk.
Right. But you can go all the way up to Stack.
Yeah. Well, I can give you an anecdote.
But they better not. They better reopen Neiman's, or I will personally
you're
stop
a Dallas
supporting,
woman. That's,
supporting GDP.
You're a Dallas
I'm
woman.
wearing
You
Neiman Marcus.
Yeah, that's the home of it. But I will say, in my hometown of Santa Monica, there's a big mall there too, Class A, open air, high end, because they revamped it maybe 10 years ago to make it super high end. If you want to get bearish on the world, and remember there was also looting that took place there.
Oh yeah.
I walked through there. I went to get a haircut, so I would just walk through town and going through. And I'd say maybe 10 to 15% of businesses are open. There's a lot of boards because they were still damaged still.
Yeah.
And this happened at the end of May, right? The looting did. And when you look at it, I just don't, you want to get super bearish on a recovery of those type of things. I mean, just walk through it.
So the BLS has, if you were to drop me on a desert island and say you can only have one spreadsheet, I'd say, okay, this is my spreadsheet.
Yeah. It looks like I got a lot of tabs.
It looks like
one spreadsheet with a lot of tabs. Yeah.
It looks like fruit stripe chewing gum from when you were growing up.
Yeah, I remember
all
that.
reds and greens and yellows. Yeah. If you look at consumption in America, 75% of U.S. GDP, the top 40% of income earners, the top two quintiles, are responsible for 61% of U.S. consumption, or if you prefer, 42% of U.S. GDP.
Okay.
They're not spending. They're not. Gallup polls showed that 41% of college degree holders believe strongly in mask efficacy. 58% of postgraduate degree holders believed in mask efficacy. And these people are petrified and in their homes. And they're learning to not shop. It has to have been painful for a lot of people for a few months, but their spending habits are changing. So I don't, as bad as the retail apocalypse is, I'm not so sure that it couldn't possibly be even worse than we can imagine.
Okay.
So that's retail.
Okay. Well, let's go into office space.
So office is interesting. Since bottoming in February, defaults are up about 39% in the office space. And everybody's like holding their breath because nothing's changed hands. But transaction volumes have absolutely crashed. If you look Q1 transaction volume, Rich Hill at Morgan Stanley?
He does a lot of good CRE work.
He does, and he does broad CRE work.
Yeah. 4
kids. Hi, Rich. Anyways, best analyst on the street, but he's transaction volumes through Q1, and the fact that Green Street pricing, no, is it CPPA? Anyways, somebody's pricing has converged with residential pricing, a graph that he's been running forever. And
you're talking pricing, like price per square foot.
Price per square foot.
Okay.
And that's before we see Q2 transaction volumes, which have got to be worse. Magnitudes worse. But pricing is going to come down. And but nobody knows by how much.
Well, and also you're going to need more space probably if you're going to operate an office. You need the distancing.
You need the distancing?
At least for the foreseeable future, right?
And that's the great debate, right? But throughout North America, 33% of U.S. office space is in the 12 cities, this includes Canada, that rely heavily on public transportation. 33% of office space. So to see that delinquencies have only ticked up a little bit in the TREP data, I think we're at the beginning of that cycle. But I think price discovery is going to be very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, you're going to, for people who understand office, I think that, and have dry powder, I think that there will be some just historically amazing deals that get done on the cheap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And CMBX 12, by the way, has the highest exposure to office property.
Office, right.
Highest concentration of office.
9's retail
is
and
12.
12 is office, yeah. And you see massive, we follow like the triple B minus of that, the tranche there to like kind of get a sense of market. I think at the wides, it was traded in price, but I think the spreads were about to 1,200. Wow. They're back down to probably in the mid sixes today, 600s. But that doesn't look very cheap there. Yeah. Looks a little rich there.
Yep.
But there probably will be some opportunity there too. And then do you have a take on multifamily? You said you had a good multifamily story.
Multifamily also had delinquency rates south of 4%, and they're up 71%. Multifamily delinquencies. Everything that appealed to multifamily investors has been turned on its head. People don't want to get in an elevator and go up to their high-rise fancy apartment.
Yeah. There's that retail store below you that you were shopping at isn't open anymore. Right.
And if you're a millennial, all of a sudden commuting doesn't sound so bad, and you don't have to even come into the office.
Right.
So the millennials will never move out to the suburbs narrative has been blown to bits.
Right.
And boomers wanting to move into the city and have an urban hip lifestyle because
no bid anymore, right?
70 is the new 80.
Yeah.
So again, I think that price discovery is going to be very interesting because according to CoStar, 82% of multifamily constructed throughout the last cycle was luxury. Mm-hmm. And who's making the money?
Yeah, I'm always amazed to see this advertisement for a luxury apartment. I'm like, what's the luxury? It has like a washer and dryer in it. That's considered a luxury.
Yeah. And a granite countertop.
Yeah, right. Wow. Yeah. So on that note, let's transition that. So you kind of talk about this narrative of perhaps maybe the millennials and the younger generations accepting suburbia or at least non-urban centers.
We might have a baby boom.
Yeah. Also think about this. What does it do for residential?
Residential is fascinating.
Yeah. So like single family.
Fascinating.
May be more
and by the way,
again.
the highest percentage of Americans missing rental payments. My new best friend, Apartment Something, because we're all watching these real-time surveys of.
That's the best data set there is.
Purveyors we've never heard of. Yeah. But the highest number of non-payment among renters in July, single-family rental. So this darling asset class is being laid bare that they don't have rents that are anywhere near market pricing because the highest percentage of renters are unable to pay.
Yeah. What do you think the implications of the, I call it the anti-hotel movement, but the shared living, like the Airbnb is kind of how I think about it, not to get into company specific, but what do you think the impact of that is too as people do
I reflect Airbnb's future personally.
Okay.
My family's been vacationing in Destin, Florida, which is like after 12 hours you kill a child.
I spent some time in Tallahassee, so Destin was a desirable place to leave Tallahassee and go for it.
So it's a 12-hour drive from Dallas. Every year we rent a penthouse top floor unit that'll hold all six of us and grandma, and I will never rent there again. I'm not getting in an elevator and going up to the ninth floor unit. I'm renting another hour down, same beach, basically, but one more hour drive.
Maybe another death of one of your family members.
We might have to sacrifice a child. Yeah. But a single family, standalone, on the water that I made sure, reading the reviews, is private and you're not on top of other people. That Airbnb owner's money good.
Yep.
The Airbnb person on the ninth floor, not so much. So it's going to depend, I think, on the actual unit. And by the way, how many mortgages these people are holding. because it's
Right, we're going to find out some of that too. I think we're going to see the people who missed the travel because people didn't want to rent the Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
Can they actually cover that nut of their payments, right? And that's
because some of these people have 5-6 properties,
right?
Because this was their retirement plan. This was like,
right.
look at this cash flow,
right? And it's like, oh, well, it takes care of itself. My rents and the amount I collect covers all the payments.
It sounds so good,
right?
And so that's one cohort.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have on February the 19th, it's just the date sticks with me because it's when the market peaked. February the 19th, Zillow released a report about the silver tsunami and how there was going to be this measured movement of baby boomers retiring, selling their homes into the market. Mm-hmm. Millions and millions and millions of homes. It's a huge question mark overhanging the market because a decade ago, when you could have come up with the same hypothesis that the baby boomers are going to sell their homes because the market crashed and they want to make sure to get the equity out, their homes are worth more now than they were a decade ago. Millennials actually might want to buy them, whereas they didn't last year. Mm-hmm. But it's a complete unknown when it's finally safe to have an open house what the supply is going to look like between the Airbnb investors. Mm-hmm. It's about 12% of the market is these small investors, and it's I think it's a third of the market is 65 up.
Okay. Wow.
So we have had, I mean, the NARs, they can roll out the same press release every month. The lack of supply is
right.
putting a floor under home prices. The lack of supply is putting.
I don't think I've ever seen the NAR bearish even throughout the whole.
Of course not.
The whole
of course not.
That's their industry.
And
that's the National Association of Realtors.
I get hate mail when I talk about the silver tsunami. Yeah. Boomers aren't going to leave their homes, and like, what if they need to sell?
Yeah. Well, I guess
they can't stay in the workforce another decade, which they could do.
But what you could do is you could
ago.
listen to Tom Selleck. He's the one selling you reverse mortgages.
Reverse mortgages.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. Sam, I got a question for you. Silver tsunami, is that alliterative? Because it's technically with a T, so is it phonetics?
If you don't look at the
or
spelling, and then I think the phonetics work.
It's the phonetics is what drives
silver tsunami.
Yeah.
I think so, right?
Sam is our grammar expert around here, at least for a mathematician.
That's good to know.
I need to have someone help me my grammar.
Which leaves us in pretty poor standing, but that's how we do it.
My editors sometimes tell me that I've got too much alliteration, and pull it back, Danielle.
Yeah.
You're writing about finance.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, acronyms and alliteration.
They're fun. It makes writing fun.
So we talked about that dynamic.
So residential's a huge question mark, but let me put it this way: for CoreLogic, for any cheerleading type, it's their job to be cheerleaders. Mm-hmm. It's in their job description to come out and say, in the year through May 2021, we're going to see home prices fall 6.6%. I mean, it's just enormous.
Right.
And you don't.
But mortgage rates are at historic lows. They're always at historic lows.
They're at 3%, and they really are at historic lows. That affects prepayments, but it doesn't affect affordability because you haven't had any price discovery.
Right.
You haven't. You have the people who had planned to move, and come hell or high water, they moved. Mm-hmm. So that's what this pent-up huge demand is. And then you have the Mortgage Bankers Association telling you that credit availability is at a 6-year low. So, and if you look at the Senior Loan Officer Survey,
they're tightening the lending standards.
They're tightening the lending standards, and you also have to, by the way, have a job to get a mortgage.
Yeah, and you kind of have to have a down payment. There's no piggybacking loans, and
jumbos are a train wreck.
Yeah.
Speaking to people in Dallas, my buddy who's been in mortgage lending forever is like, now they're internally we're talking about a 25% down payment for jumbos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting considering that so many boomers live in really expensive homes.
Right. No, I agree
with you.
So
there's dislocation to come.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely a jumbo market out here, and it's if you want good rates, it is 25
yes, I know.
Minimum.
People leave California, they come to Dallas, and they think it's a BOGO sale.
Right.
They're like, oh, look, I can buy one and get one free. So they knock them down and build a monster, and I'm like, Californians.
Yeah.
And they're like, why isn't there a state income tax? And I'm like,
wait till you get that property tax bill and that BOGO.
That's right.
All right, it's a little higher out there.
That's where exactly.
But I would appreciate it if you did call it the Californians. If you remember, like on the Saturday Night Live sketch, that was always a clever one. So, all right, well,
do we got time to talk about the election coming up?
Of course.
We got some time for that because I know we started out talking about the how
Politicization.
politicized the pandemic has become.
Well, this
we
was,
have,
I mean, if I may dare say, and I was raised in a very conservative Republican household, but in the history of American politics, the magnitude of Trump's backfire on masks is going to go down in history. You maximize the efficacy of opening the economy by telling everybody by making it a national. There were some places in Germany where it was a 10,000 euro fine if you didn't have a mask on. And look at their open table. Mm-hmm. They're hopping in Munich. Yeah. So, he could have gone out there with an Andrew Jackson mask on, and his whole base would have followed him. Did I just say that out loud? I did. But the point is, he wanted to get the economy up and running, so all the Republican governors reopened their states prematurely, and now he's going into an election with a deepening recession going into the third quarter, and 20.7% of Americans out of work. Mm-hmm. So, but this is of his doing, and I think that's why there's 3 political action committees that are Republicans that are trying to get out the vote for Biden.
Yeah, I saw that too. There's Republicans voting against Trump is one of them too that came out too. They're using Reagan speeches and just putting all this calamity that he was describing back in 79 and 80 with it's juxtaposed with the current events and just.
I mean, I don't know if you saw the Rubenstein Bloomberg interview with Mattis.
No,
it was excellent.
Yeah.
By the way.
Mad Dog Mattis.
Yeah. But it took place right before COVID in an open auditorium full of people. But it was January or something that it took place. And he was pressed. And he said, I will never say a single disparaging word about a sitting president. Period. End. And he was adamant. And when he wrote that op-ed, I think it was a moment in the Republican Party. I think it was a moment in Republican Party history. And if voters are, as Jeffrey said yesterday, because I can't take credit, if the U.S. presidential election was to take place in 2021, there would be adequate time for a third party to rise.
Yeah.
There would be, because there are too many people who don't feel they have a choice on November the 3rd.
Right.
And there's nothing, I mean, people are equally disparaging of everybody inside the Beltway. Mm-hmm. I mean,
I think the approval of Congress in general is like near the nadir. Right. It's like 20% or something. Right. It traffics in that area.
But the animosity inside of the Republican Party is there's something very historic taking place right now.
Do you think there's any chance that he's going to step out or just drop out of this race at this point in time? I mean, given the backdrop
I don't think it's
that we're
outside the
about,
realm. I mean, you cannot ever rule anything out with him. Yeah. You just can't. I mean, Peggy Noonan said it best. She wrote an op-ed about 3 weeks ago where she had a press conference of a theoretical press conference of Trump saying, "You don't deserve me. I'm out of here."
I mean, that would be the way he would do it, I would think.
Right.
Yeah. Right? I mean, it makes sense.
It's mic drop.
You don't deserve me for 4 more years. Bye.
Yeah. I mean, it is amazing to see how even the one issue voters are now starting to think a little bit differently, right? And
well, look, it's you can't with a straight face you can't say, I'm going to sacrifice your mom.
Right. Well, we've had that debate internally a lot where it's like we look at numbers all day long. We're data people, right? We look at analytics. But a lot of this stuff doesn't hit home until you know somebody, right? And then that makes it real. And I always like that on the the Sunday morning shows and stuff. There's always some tribute at the end of the people who have passed away, but that makes it real, and that's the whole thing. And so, I mean, when you dismiss numbers, it's just numbers. Like, oh, it's 3 million people got it, whatever. It's just a flu. And you talk to people, and it's like it was horrific.
Oh
yeah, right. And
I mean, look, my youngest lives and dies at the local burger stand. I mean, I live in a massive city, Dallas, but I also live in a tiny little community across the street from SMU University where you can walk everywhere. Mm-hmm. So a block and a half from my house, there's a little burger stand called Burger House. There was a man who worked there for 15 years. He knew my son by first name. And my son's probably got high cholesterol at this point. Anyways, but he called him Johncito, Little John.
Yeah.
And knew he was always given extra tater tots. And 60 years old, I'm getting tears in my eyes. No comorbidities. Inside 10 days, dead. Health department shut down the burger stand, and there was this. The beautiful thing about America is we had a GoFundMe campaign within 7 days, and raised a ton of money because there was no money for a funeral and all this.
Right.
It's just but when it hits home, you can't make it go away.
Right.
And you can't not be angry when you see the president at the podium with no mask on.
Right.
And people standing behind him with a mask on. You can't not be angry when it hits home.
Yeah. Sam, didn't you mention to me today that Dr. Fauci said that he hasn't spoken with the president in 2 months?
In at least 2 months.
And
So it's
at
probably
least-
3 or 4 months, right?
Yeah,
So-
I mean, it's crazy. And so let's talk about leadership, right? So I think that's what we're devoid of right here. And I think that's why we're struggling massively.
Right.
How do we change it? I mean, does the election help? How do you
I'm
put on your
looking-
hat and thinking about it? How do we get better leadership?
I'm really looking at the midterms.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some very rational people in America right now who are talking about a third party. Mitch Daniels is involved in an organization, to give but one example. I'm going to try and look him up and find him and talk to him, because I think that Americans are finished talking about a third party. I think the middle of America, the middle of America, not the I want universal basic income and free Medicare and free health care for life and a pony. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about hardworking, middle income earners in this country who have had it. And I think that it's going to be that cohort that can find the strength within and the tenacity, because this is huge. It all involves money.
Yeah.
It all comes down to money. You can get as angry as you want. If you can't raise funds, you're dead in the water. But I think that there might be a critical mass going into the midterms. I think that my eyes on the midterms already.
So you're looking 2 years ahead, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. When you think about it too, I think it's important to recognize that we have cycles, right? And we talked about the idea of this was building up, there was divisiveness, and all it took was an economic misstep. So you think about,
I get a tick in my eye when I think about the fourth turning. I'm like, oh gosh.
No, they kind of nailed it, right?
Right.
I mean, you talk about nothing more prescient, and that was written 20 years ago,
Right.
And they talk about, and you look at the cycles, and so let's put on our hats and think about that. So let's say we are in the fourth turning, right, where we actually get this change, and you kind of see it from the Gen Z type of community. You see them out marching, very more active than, let's say, perhaps a lot of the millennials were.
I've got a Gen Z intern who, I think he's working 24 hours a day, and I'm like, you're an intern. I mean, this generation's insane.
Yeah, no, it's like the opposite, but it fits right into that four cycles
Right.
of how those work before the turn. So what does it look like? Are we going to actually see that this year with some of that materializing? And what does it look like? Because it usually takes some critical event. And I think this is going to be a line in the sand that we're going to say, March 2020, the world changed, or at least the U.S. changed significantly.
Of course it did.
Right? And when we're going to look back, what does that look like in your world? Like, what does the post-COVID world look like, this next turning? What does it look like?
I mean, my oldest is 16, and I mean, so he'll vote in the midterms, and so it's really personal at this point. But I think that if you combine the middle that I'm describing with the generation behind the millennials, you're going to have allies there.
Yeah.
You're going to have alliances.
But
there.
that's part of the book, right? The fourth turning
Yeah.
too, is that it's the alternating generations that get together. So it's like the Xers and the Zs, right?
Right.
Us and the Zs, right? Together,
And
right?
the irony is that the boomers are relying on the millennials to
Right.
sell their homes, and for all kinds of things.
Yeah.
The boomers are relying on the millennials.
Yeah.
But the animosity between those two generations is amazing.
Right. There's massive divisiveness there, right?
So,
Yeah.
but people are like, she's the most bearish. She doesn't have anything nice to say about any asset class. Blah 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 blah. I have great hope for younger Americans.
Yeah.
And
Well,
what they
that's-
can do for this economy.
I think I said it a couple podcasts ago, and one of the guys on my team was like, there was a great comment because they said, you just don't short America. The ingenuity, the
Oh, yeah.
entrepreneurialism, we'll get through it.
Yeah,
right? It'll look different, but we'll get through it.
crushing small businesses in America, leaving them behind,
Yeah.
having the Fed choose the winners in the top 1%,
Right.
and fiscal stimulus. The barbell approach and leaving out 47% of American workers
I know, they're
were
in small
left
business, yeah.
behind.
Right.
So, but
And
they're-
also, don't forget, a lot of that is restaurants. It's the things we do for
what was that?
entertainment.
What was that Yelp survey? 53% of restaurants will not reopen. That's a huge number, and it's a huge employing sector as well.
Right.
But you cannot have a phoenix rise if you don't burn it to the ground. And I think that applies to the economy, and I think that applies to politics in America. And I think you have to talk about the two of them together.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome way to end it, because I think that's perfect. Because sometimes, they always say that it's darkest right before the dawn, right?
That's right.
And so we've got to get through that. So thank you, Danielle. It's awesome as always.
Thank
I
you.
always learn a lot, too. It's great just to have this banter. But before we let you leave, Sam has a favorite part of the show that he wants to introduce you to.
Oh boy!
And Danielle, that favorite part of my show, or my favorite part of that show.
So
and
Sam is now
probably-
hosting the Sherman Show. Note that.
Not
That's
at
great.
all.
He's been trying to quit his co-host. He's now the host. So thanks, Sam.
Yeah, I walked into that. But my favorite part of the show, and probably your least favorite part,
boy.
is Sherman Says.
Oh boy!
You remember the
as
Sherman
we-
says
Oh,
from before.
gosh, yes.
Right.
Oh,
so
gosh, yes.
for our listeners here who might be tuning
I'm
in for
on
the
West
first time.
Coast time. My sleep is off. Okay, let's
Yeah,
do this.
so we'll give the rules of the road. It's I will offer a series of prompts alternating between you and Jeff Sherman here, to which you'll provide a top of mind response. So I'm going to give the first one to Sherman with student visas.
Disappearing, and unfortunately.
Danielle, school reopening.
Better
Schools
happen.
reopening.
Better happen for my four,
For your sanity or for the sake of your children?
for their safety.
Okay, fair enough.
Price discovery.
Challenged.
TikTok.
I wish I could get it off my daughter's phone. The government might be helping me.
The government may
Maybe.
zap that soon.
Yeah, I saw that they actually pulled out of Hong Kong,
Hong Kong.
Yeah.
which is interesting in of itself in a number of ways.
I think
but,
did Australia, one major country, outlawed it.
I don't know.
Anyways.
but
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked.
I
if it was
follow
Hong
it
Kong.
closely
Yeah.
because my daughter is TikTok.
Well,
Anyways.
I think we could do a whole episode on Hong Kong and China as well.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes.
South China Sea to Sherman.
Next conflict.
Invisible hand.
Absent.
I think it's a visible hand, and it's called J.
J-Pow.
Yeah, the big hand of J.
Mental health.
Critical.
Volker.
God.
Let's see here. I've got to pick or choose one here. Phase 2.
Hopefully, you're not talking about the trade deal there.
I'm trying not to laugh.
It's fine though. This is supposed to be light. Phase 2. Did we ever leave phase 1?
No.
That's the whole thing, right?
We still haven't had the
Right.
intellectual
That's right.
property discussion. I mean,
in our
come on.
internal Bloomberg chat with our macro folks, there was this big debate of like second wave, first wave. I'm like, let's just admit, like, we haven't controlled the first wave. It's like,
No.
oh, this is the second wave. I was like, doesn't matter. They both suck. How's that,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
This
Fine.
isn't Point Break. We're looking for the third wave. Anyway, I watched Point Break recently.
Yeah.
Awesome movie.
Hopefully it's the original one.
I did. Yes.
And the last one for Danielle is Godfather 3.
History may forgive.
All right.
not
Well,
forget.
those of you who don't know, Danielle's a huge Godfather fan.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So she was rattling off quotes before we started.
Yeah,
today, so it
I
was great,
can
yeah.
actually spend about an hour debating one or two,
Yeah.
and I never can come to a conclusion.
But 3 we just want to forget, but you just can't.
Three
Yeah.
is an abomination.
Yeah.
Three is an insult to 1 and 2.
It was kind of like Rocky 5 to me. I was always that way with Rocky 5. Then I went back. My wife had never seen a Rocky movie, and this was like last Christmas, and I was like, we're doing Rocky Marathon. So the Amazon package, got them all.
Yeah.
It was like $20 or something. Great investment, by the way. And Rocky 5 wasn't that bad when
Which
I went
one was
back and
5? Remind me.
Tommy
Was it
Gunn.
Tommy Gunn?
Tommy Gunn.
Oh
you
my
know?
gosh. Take him
to the
And so I'm
streets?
like, yeah, he's like, home team and
Yeah.
everything. So
Yeah, we last year in Florida we took the Mission Impossible 5 DVD set.
okay.
Highly recommend.
Yeah. I haven't seen any of those, so I'm going to take your recommendation.
But
there.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
The whole family can enjoy.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So noted. There's some good viewing out there. I know everybody's content starved, so
That's absolutely right.
that's what we're using here. So again, thank you, Danielle. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
How can people get in touch with you? Let's do that before we leave.
Well, follow me on Twitter at
Okay.
DiMartino Booth. Longest name out there, and then come to QuillIntelligence.com.
Yep. We'll give you a DoubleLine approval on that, and also Valuetainment Economics. How can people see that?
Valuetainment Economics. So just find Valuetainment's YouTube channel, 2.4 million followers. Jeffrey Gunlack himself is going to be premiering with this whole new show that I'm going to be launching. So people have been asking me to sit in the interviewer seat, which is very intimidating. But boy, do you learn things about people.
Oh yeah,
It's fantastic.
I remember when you were out here for our Roundtable Prime, and that was I did the most prep work I think I've ever done,
Yep.
and for that one. So it is, and again, it's just great to facilitate this
And
discussion. so
one last plug about Valuetainment Economics.
please,
It is the opposite of the financial networks. I am on a financial literacy mission,
Yeah.
and the goal is to reach millions and millions and millions of people, and getting Jeffrey Gunlack to speak in plain English, which he did for 95 minutes. That's the whole goal, is to spread the word and open financial literacy up to everybody.
right. The democratization of financialization,
Yep.
right? So, all right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Again, we can grab these podcasts off of Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes, whatever you use, Danielle.
I'll be pumping it up all over
pumping
my
up
social
DoubleLine's
media.
website as always.
Yep.
You can follow us on the Twitter. We have at Sherman Show Pod. It's kind of long too, a little bit longer than yours,
Yep.
but there's a few more words in there. So at Sherman Show Pod, we'll do that, and stay tuned for more guests coming soon. So thanks again, Danielle.
Thank you.